Sparks cascaded from Lucas's welding torch like dying stars, illuminating the skeletal frame of humanity's first hybrid warship. The hidden asteroid shipyard hummed with desperate energy, generators straining, recycled air thick with metal dust and ozone. His green eyes, bloodshot from 72 hours of continuous work, tracked the fusion of human engineering with salvaged Krath technology. The data chip spun between his calloused fingers as he studied the alien power core, its obsidian surface pulsing with malevolent light. "This has to work," he muttered, adjusting the neural interface that would allow human pilots to control Krath systems. The Empire's ships were faster, stronger, but they relied on biological integration, something humans could mimic with the right modifications. His jaw clenched as he remembered the smoking ruins of Colony 7, his sister's voice cutting out mid-transmission as Krath raiders descended from the void. 3 systems away, Callie James slipped through the shadows of a Krath patrol vessel, her flight jacket's collar turned up against the alien ship's bone-chilling atmosphere. The corridors reeked of sulfur and decay, walls lined with what looked like fossilized bone. Her brown eyes gleamed with defiance as she reached the communications array, fingers dancing over the alien controls she'd memorized during weeks of reconnaissance. The scar across her left eyebrow tightened as she initiated the broadcast, knowing every Krath frequency would carry her message. She'd lost too many friends to their raids. Mark at Kepler Station, Elena during the Proxima evacuation. This was for them. "Attention, Krath Empire," her voice cut through the void, transmitted across a dozen star systems. "This is humanity. We know what you've done to our colonies. We know you think we're weak, scattered, helpless." She paused, her hand resting on the stolen scout ship's controls. "You're wrong. We've learned from your technology. We've built something new. And now we're giving you one warning. We are coming for you." The transmission ended with a pulse of static that made every Krath vessel in range shudder. Emergency klaxons wailed as alien commanders scrambled to locate the source, but Callie was already gone, the scout ship streaking toward the asteroid belt where Lucas waited. In the command chamber of the Krath flagship Bone Render, Warlord Vex Thul's tail lashed against the deck plating with a thunderous crack. The towering reptilian's obsidian scales bristled as it studied the transmission data, red slits narrowing to burning lines, its clawed hands flexed, crushing the armrest of its throne. "Humans," it hissed, the word dripping with contempt. "Prey animals making threats." Its lieutenant, a smaller Krath with mottled gray scales, cowered nearby. "Double the raids. Show them what happens when food tries to bite back." But as the warlord dismissed the transmission, it failed to notice the subtle energy signature hidden in the broadcast, a scanning pulse that had mapped every Krath vessel in the sector, feeding data back to Lucas's hidden shipyard. The rebels now knew exactly what they were up against. Lucas felt the data stream arrive, his neural interface buzzing with incoming intelligence. Ship positions, patrol routes, weapon configurations, everything Callie's message had secretly gathered. He smiled grimly, the first genuine expression of hope he'd worn in months. The data chip caught the light as he spun it faster, mind already racing with tactical possibilities. The Krath had superior numbers, better weapons, faster ships, but they'd made one crucial mistake. They'd underestimated human ingenuity. And now, in this forgotten asteroid field surrounded by the skeletal frames of hybrid warships, Lucas was about to prove that humanity's greatest weapon wasn't technology, it was the refusal to surrender. The rebellion had begun with a warning. Soon it would become a reckoning. The hybrid prototype Defiance cut through space like a vengeful spirit, its hull a patchwork of human engineering and Krath biotechnology. Callie's hands moved across the controls with fluid precision, feeling the alien systems respond to her neural commands. The ship's organic components pulsed beneath the metal plating, creating an unsettling harmony between two disparate technologies. "Neural sync at 94%, she reported into her comm, adjusting her flight jacket's collar as acceleration pressed her into the pilot's seat. "Lucas, your modifications are holding. This thing responds like it's reading my mind." 3,000 kilometers away, hidden in the asteroid shipyard, Lucas monitored her flight telemetry while his hands never stopped working. Sparks flew from his welding torch as he integrated another Krath power core into the second prototype's frame. The rebel engineer, a wiry man named Pike, chewed nervously on his metal stylus while calibrating targeting systems. "Bioelectric resonance is stable," Pike muttered, his oil-stained fingers dancing across holographic displays, "but I'm seeing some weird fluctuations in the weapon arrays. The Krath tech is trying to adapt." Lucas paused his welding, green eyes narrowing as he studied the readouts. The data chip spun between his fingers, a habit that had intensified since they'd begun working with alien technology. "It's learning our firing patterns. We need to randomize the neural inputs." "Copy that," Callie's voice crackled through the comm as she banked around a massive asteroid. "Speaking of learning, I've got 3 Krath patrol fighters incoming. Time to see if your baby can dance." The Krath vessels emerged from hyperspace in a triangular formation, their bone-white hulls gleaming like predator teeth. Each ship was twice the size of the Defiance, bristling with plasma cannons that could vaporize a human frigate in seconds. Their pilots, young Krath warriors eager to prove themselves, saw only a single unknown vessel, easy prey. Callie grinned fiercely, the scar on her eyebrow creasing as adrenaline flooded her system. "Let's show them what humans do when we get angry." The Defiance suddenly accelerated, its hybrid engines producing thrust signatures the Krath had never encountered. Callie rolled inverted and dove beneath the patrol formation, her ship's organic components anticipating the enemy's movements through some primitive form of telepathy inherited from their original creators. The lead Krath pilot fired, plasma bolts searing through vacuum where the human ship had been a microsecond before. Callie's counterattack came from an impossible angle. The Defiance twisted through 3 dimensions simultaneously, its weapons targeting the weakest points in Krath armor. Blue energy beams, human particle cannons enhanced with Krath targeting algorithms, punched through the lead fighter's hull. The alien vessel split apart in a cascade of venting atmosphere and dying screams. "One down," Callie reported, banking hard as the remaining fighters regrouped. "These things are fast, but they're not expecting human unpredictability." Lucas watched the battle unfold through sensor data, his jaw clenched with barely contained emotion. Every successful hit, every evasive maneuver vindicated months of desperate work. But he knew this was just the beginning. The second Krath fighter attempted a ramming attack, its pilot screaming war cries in the alien tongue. Callie rolled at the last second, the enemy ship passing close enough to scrape armor plating. The Defiance's tail guns, jury-rigged from salvaged Krath weapons, stitched a line of destruction across the attacker's flank. The third pilot, more experienced, tried to maintain distance and use superior firepower. But the hybrid ship's organic components gave Callie an edge no human pilot had ever possessed. She could feel the enemy's intentions through the ship's borrowed nervous system. "He's going to break left and dive," she whispered, somehow certain of the alien's next move. The Defiance was already turning before the Krath pilot acted, particle beams converging on the spot where the enemy ship would be. The final fighter erupted in a ball of superheated plasma, its death cry echoing across Krath communication channels. In military command centers throughout the occupied systems, alien commanders studied the engagement recordings with growing unease. But their response was swift and merciless. Within hours, a full Krath battle group descended on Meridian Colony, a farming world that had dared to send supplies to the rebellion. The attack was brutal, methodical, designed to send a message that would echo across human space. Lucas received the distress transmissions in his hidden shipyard, watching helplessly as orbital bombardment turned fields of grain into seas of glass. The data chip cracked between his clenched fingers as he witnessed the colony's final moments, hundreds of thousands of humans reduced to statistical casualties in the Krath's war on hope. "They're escalating," Pike observed quietly, his stylus forgotten between his teeth. The engineer's hazel eyes were wide with shock as casualty reports flooded their communications array. Callie's voice cut through the static, exhausted but unbroken. "Lucas, we need more ships. We need them now. I can't protect everyone with just one prototype." Lucas stared at the wreckage of Meridian Colony on his screens, green eyes blazing with cold fury. The Krath thought brutality would break human resistance. They were about to learn how wrong they could be. "Pike," he growled, turning back to his welding torch. "Wake up the night shift. We work around the clock from now on. The Krath want to escalate?" Sparks flew as he began integrating another alien power core. "Let's show them what escalation really looks like." The neutral trading station, Haven's Rest, drifted in the gravitational dead zone between three star systems, its rotating habitats a patchwork of human engineering and alien architecture. In the station's grimy cantina, beneath flickering holo displays advertising everything from Centauri whiskey to Krath nutrient paste, Lucas James sat hunched over a scarred table, the broken data chip clutched in his palm. Callie found him there, her flight jacket bearing fresh scorch marks from her latest patrol. The scar across her eyebrow seemed deeper in the cantina's harsh lighting as she slid into the seat across from him. Around them, the usual mix of smugglers, refugees, and information brokers conducted business in a dozen languages. "You look like hell," she observed, studying his bloodshot eyes and the metal shavings still dusted through his dark hair. "Meridian Colony had 300,000 people," Lucas replied without looking up. His voice was hollow, mechanical. "I watched the casualty reports. Children's evacuation centers targeted first. The Krath knew exactly where to hit for maximum terror." Callie reached across the table, her fingers closing over his clenched fist. "You can't save everyone, Lucas, but you can give them the tools to save themselves." He finally met her eyes, green orbs blazing with barely contained rage. 6 more ships. That's what we've built since Meridian. 6 hybrid fighters against a fleet that numbers in the thousands. Then we make those 6 count. Callie's brown eyes hardened with determination. "I've been in contact with resistance cells across 4 systems. They're ready to move, but they need proof that we can actually hurt the Krath." A new voice interrupted their conversation, melodic but clipped, speaking heavily accented standard. "Perhaps I can provide that proof." They turned to see an avian figure approaching their table, violet eyes glowing faintly in the dim light. The alien's feathers, once brilliant blue and silver, were now dull and patchy, its wings clipped short in the brutal Krath fashion. A tattered cloak hung from its shoulders like a funeral shroud. "My name is Zephyr of High Winds," the creature continued, its beak clicking nervously. "I was a navigator for the Krath Third Fleet until I could no longer stomach their methods." Lucas tensed, his hand moving instinctively toward the plasma pistol at his hip. But Callie raised a calming gesture, her pilot's instincts reading the alien's body language. The creature's posture spoke of defeat, shame, and desperate hope, not deception. "What do you want?" Lucas asked bluntly. Zephyr's wings twitched, feathers rustling with anxiety. "To help you destroy them. I know their patrol schedules, their supply routes, the locations of their fuel depots, but more importantly," the alien leaned forward, violet eyes blazing, "I know why your warning terrified them." Callie tilted her head, focusing intently on the defector. "Explain." "The transmission you sent, it carried a scanning pulse that mapped their entire fleet configuration. But it also contained something else, something that made their commanders panic." Zephyr's beak snapped shut with emphasis. "Genetic markers. Your hybrid ships aren't just using Krath technology, they're using it better than the Krath themselves." Lucas felt his pulse quicken, the broken data chip cutting into his palm. "What are you saying?" "Your species has a natural neural compatibility with our biotechnology that exceeds even the Krath's own abilities. In the right hands, a single hybrid ship could outfight an entire patrol squadron." Before Lucas could respond, the cantina's lights flickered and died. Emergency illumination cast everything in blood-red shadow as proximity alarms began wailing throughout the station. Through the transparasteel viewports, the distinctive bone-white hulls of Krath raiders became visible, disgorging boarding pods like metallic wasps. "They found us," Callie breathed, already rising from her seat. Her hand went to her flight jacket's collar, fingers adjusting it with unconscious precision. "No," Zephyr corrected, wings spreading despite their clipped condition. "I led them here. Not intentionally. My former masters placed a genetic tracker in my bloodstream, but perhaps," the alien's eyes blazed with sudden purpose, "perhaps this is the opportunity we need." Chaos erupted in the cantina as Krath shock troops blasted through the airlocks. Their reptilian forms moved with predatory grace, plasma rifles sweeping the room as civilians screamed and scattered. The lead warrior wore the crimson markings of an elite hunter-killer, its scales bristling with anticipation. Lucas grabbed his toolkit, muscle memory transforming him from grief-stricken engineer to hardened survivor. "The docking bay, if we can reach the Defiance." "No," Callie's voice cut through the mayhem with surprising calm. "We make our stand here. Show them what humans do when we're cornered." She drew her sidearm, a modified pulse pistol that hummed with barely contained energy. Lucas hefted a plasma cutter from his toolkit, its industrial-grade beam capable of slicing through bulkhead plating. Zephyr produced a curved blade from beneath its cloak, the weapon gleaming with alien alloy. The first Krath warrior rounded the corner, its red eyes locked on the three fugitives. It raised its rifle with predatory confidence, expecting easy prey. Instead, it found coordinated resistance. Callie's shots punched through its chest armor, while Lucas's plasma cutter removed the creature's weapon arm in a spray of superheated metal. Zephyr moved like liquid shadow, its blade finding gaps in alien armor with surgical precision. The battle was brief but vicious. When the smoke cleared, 6 Krath warriors lay dead around their table, their weapons scattered across the cantina floor. Other resistance fighters throughout the station had followed their example, turning a routine boarding action into a costly victory. As station security restored order, Lucas found himself staring at the fallen Krath with something approaching wonder. For the first time since Meridian, he felt hope stirring in his chest. "This is just the beginning," Callie said, holstering her weapon. "Word of this fight will spread. Every human colony will know that the Krath can bleed." Zephyr nodded, violet eyes gleaming. "And I will help you make them bleed more. My people have suffered under their rule for generations. It's time we reminded the galaxy that predators can become prey." Lucas looked down at the broken data chip in his palm, then carefully tucked it into his pocket. The fragment would remind him of those they'd lost, but it wouldn't define their future. That future was being born here, in the smoke and sparks of this makeshift alliance. The rebellion had found its voice. Now it was time to roar. Lucas's hidden shipyard had transformed into a hive of desperate activity. 7 hybrid fighters hung in various stages of completion, while teams of engineers crawled over their hulls like antibodies fighting an infection. The air recyclers strained against the constant welding smoke and the acrid tang of overcharged plasma conduits. Pike chewed through his third metal stylus of the day, hazel eyes darting between holographic displays showing fleet status and incoming threat assessments. "Sensor grids picking up movement," he reported, stylus clicking against his teeth. "Krath battle group, maybe 30 ships, moving on an intercept course. They've been hunting us for 3 days. Lucas's jaw clenched as he studied the tactical display, his calloused fingers spinning what remained of his broken data chip. The Krath had grown tired of probing attacks. This was a full extermination fleet, led by ships he didn't recognize. Heavier armor, more weapons, and energy signatures that made his hybrid prototypes look like children's toys. "How long until they find us?" he asked. 6 hours, maybe less. Pike's voice cracked slightly. "Boss, we've got 4 fighters ready for combat and 3 that might fly if we're lucky. Against 30 Krath ships, that's not a battle, it's a massacre." Callie's voice crackled through the comm system from where she sat in the cockpit of Defiance, running pre-flight diagnostics. "Then we don't fight them ship to ship. We fight them like humans." Meaning we cheat. The plan that emerged over the next frantic hour would have been called suicidal by any rational military commander. The asteroid field contained hundreds of mining charges left over from the belt's industrial days, enough explosive power to crack a small moon. But the charges were old, unstable, and would require manual detonation at precisely the right moment. "You're talking about turning the entire field into a weapons system," Zephyr observed, its violet eyes studying the tactical projections. The alien defector had proven invaluable, providing intelligence on Krath ship configurations and tactical doctrines. Its clipped wings twitched with nervous energy as it processed the implications. The timing would have to be perfect. "It will be," Callie said with grim certainty. "I've been flying these rocks for weeks. Every asteroid, every orbit, every gravitational field, I know them better than the Krath know their own nests." Lucas felt doubt gnawing at his resolve like acid. The plan required splitting their tiny fleet, using 2 fighters as bait, while the others positioned the mining charges. If the timing was off by even seconds, they'd destroy themselves along with the enemy. But as he watched his people, his family now, prepare for what might be their final battle, he realized he'd never been more proud to be human. The Krath fleet arrived like a plague of metallic locusts, their bone-white hulls gleaming with predatory confidence. At their head flew the Marrow Crown, a dreadnought-class vessel that dwarfed anything Lucas had ever seen. Its hull bristled with weapons capable of glassing entire worlds, and its biomechanical systems pulsed with malevolent life. But as the Krath ships entered the asteroid field, their commanders focused on the wrong threat. They saw 4 hybrid fighters scattered among the rocks, easy targets for a fleet of their size. What they didn't see were the hundreds of mining charges being carefully positioned by remote drones, each one synced to a master detonation sequence. Callie's voice cut through the comm chatter, calm and professional despite the odds. "All units, this is lead. Remember, we're not trying to win a dogfight. We're trying to survive long enough to spring our trap." The first phase went exactly as planned. The hybrid fighters engaged the Krath advance scouts, drawing them deeper into the asteroid field. Callie's ship danced between the floating rocks like a leaf on the wind, leading a dozen enemy fighters on a merry chase through narrow canyons and unstable debris fields. Lucas monitored the battle from his command station, watching as the Krath fleet funneled into the trap. The mining charges were in position, armed and waiting. All they needed was for the enemy dreadnought to reach the predetermined coordinates. That's when everything went wrong. The Marrow Crown suddenly veered off course, its biomechanical sensors having detected something that made its alien commander suspicious. Instead of continuing into the trap, the massive ship began a tactical withdrawal, pulling its escort fleet with it. "They're leaving the field," Pike reported, his voice tight with disbelief. "How did they know?" Callie's fighter streaked past the command station, enemy plasma bolts lighting up the void around her. "I'm seeing something weird here. That dreadnought's got weapon configurations I've never seen before. The energy signatures." She paused, her pilot's intuition wrestling with impossible data. "Lucas, they look human." "That's impossible," Lucas replied, but even as he spoke the words, his engineer's mind was processing the implications. The Krath were raiders, scavengers, thieves. They'd been pillaging human colonies for decades. What if they'd stolen more than just resources and lives? Zephyr's wings suddenly bristled, feathers standing on end as ancient memories surfaced. "The taken fleet," it whispered, violet eyes wide with recognition. "I thought it was legend, ships and crews captured intact, modified, turned against their own kind." The truth hit Lucas like a physical blow, driving the air from his lungs. The Marrow Crown wasn't just carrying human technology, it was crewed by humans. Captured colonists, their minds twisted by Krath bioengineering, their skills perverted into weapons against their own species. "We can't detonate the charges," he said quietly. "There are humans aboard that ship." "Humans who've been enslaved, mind-wiped, turned into puppets?" Callie's voice carried the weight of a terrible decision. "If we don't stop them here, they'll hit more colonies. More innocents will suffer." Lucas closed his eyes, the broken data chip cutting into his palm as he made the hardest choice of his life. His sister's face flashed through his memory, not as she'd died, but as she'd lived, full of laughter and hope. She would have understood. She would have forgiven him. "All units," he said into the comm, his voice steady despite the tears streaming down his face. "Execute Sunburst Protocol. Detonate all charges in sequence. Priority is stopping the dreadnought." But as his finger hovered over the detonation trigger, proximity alarms screamed through the command center. The Marrow Crown had changed course again, accelerating directly toward the shipyard with weapons charging. The Krath had found them, and somewhere aboard that approaching nightmare, Human hands were preparing to destroy the very people they'd once sworn to protect. The war had just become personal in the cruelest possible way. The Marrow Crown hung in space like a monument to corruption, its hull a grotesque fusion of Krath biotechnology and human engineering. But as Lucas studied the detailed scans from his failing sensors, his blood turned to ice. Embedded in the alien ship's superstructure were components he recognized, not just human in origin, but specifically from the Prometheus project. His hands shook as he pulled up archived schematics from his personal files, the broken data chip slipping from nerveless fingers. 20 years ago, he'd been a junior engineer on humanity's most ambitious starship project. The Prometheus was meant to be their answer to alien superiority, a vessel that could traverse the galaxy and establish humanity as a true spacefaring civilization. "That's impossible," Pike breathed, reading the data over Lucas's shoulder. The younger engineer's stylus fell from his mouth, clattering on the deck plating. The Prometheus was destroyed during its maiden voyage. Everyone said it was a reactor overload. "It wasn't destroyed," Lucas whispered, his voice hollow with dawning horror. "It was taken." Through the command center's viewports, they could see the approaching dreadnought more clearly now. The bone-white Krath armor couldn't completely hide the elegant curves of human design beneath. Worse, the ship's weapon arrays were powering up with a familiar blue glow, the same particle beams Lucas had helped design 2 decades ago. Callie's voice crackled over the comm from her fighter, strain evident despite her professional calm. "Lucas, whatever that thing is, it's fast. Faster than anything the Krath have ever fielded, and those weapons—" Static burst through the transmission as she rolled desperately to avoid incoming fire. "They're targeting our weak points with impossible accuracy." "Because they know our ships better than we do," Lucas replied grimly. The Prometheus carried complete technical specifications for every human vessel class. If the Krath have been studying those files for 20 years... Zephyr's wings drooped, feathers dulling with despair. "The taken fleet is real, then. Ships captured with their crews, their knowledge, their souls." The alien's beak clicked rapidly, a sign of extreme distress. "My people have legends of such things. Vessels that turned children against their parents, lovers against their beloved. We thought them nightmares." Lucas felt rage building in his chest, hot and pure and focused. The Krath hadn't just stolen human lives and colonies. They'd perverted humanity's greatest achievement, turning their own ingenuity against them. Every hybrid ship in his fleet was based on salvaged Krath technology, but the Krath's most powerful vessel was built from stolen human dreams. "All fighters fall back to the shipyard," he ordered. "We can't outrun them, but we can make them pay for every meter." The asteroid facility erupted into controlled chaos as technicians armed mining charges and defensive systems. Pike coordinated the evacuation of non-essential personnel, while Lucas sealed himself into the command center's emergency bunker. If they were going to die here, they'd at least take some of the enemy with them. The first wave of Krath fighters swept through the asteroid field like avenging angels, their bone-white hulls reflecting the hellish glow of plasma exchanges. But these weren't the same undisciplined raiders they'd faced before. These pilots flew with human tactical precision, using formations and maneuvers that Lucas recognized from military academy textbooks. Callie's Defiance led the defense, her hybrid ship dancing between asteroids as she tried to buy time for the evacuation. But for every Krath fighter she destroyed, 2 more took its place. The enemy had numbers, superior technology, and the tactical knowledge of humanity's greatest military minds. Lucas, her voice was tight with concentration as she rolled beneath a spread of missiles. "I'm reading massive energy buildup from the dreadnought. Whatever they're charging, it's going to crack this asteroid like an egg." Through the command center's sensors, Lucas watched the Marrow Crown slowly rotate, bringing its main weapon to bear. The cannon was easily 100 meters long, its barrel crackling with contained lightning. At its base, he could see the distinctive housing of a human antimatter reactor. His antimatter reactor, the one he'd designed as a young engineer full of hope for humanity's future. "Zephyr," he said quietly, "in your legends, how does one kill a ship that cannot die?" The alien's violet eyes met his through the display screen. by making it remember what it used to be. An impossible plan began forming in Lucas's mind, built from desperation and the faint hope that somewhere aboard the Marrow Crown, some trace of the original Prometheus crew might still exist. If the Krath had truly kept the humans alive to exploit their knowledge, then perhaps that knowledge could be turned against them. "Pike," he called to his assistant, "can you patch me into the shipyard's transmitter? Full power, all frequencies." "That'll light us up like a beacon," Pike protested, his hazel eyes wide with alarm. "Every Krath sensor in the system will lock onto us." "That's the idea." Lucas activated the transmission array, his voice echoing across the void to every ship in the battle. But he wasn't speaking to the Krath, he was speaking to the ghosts trapped inside their stolen flagship. "Prometheus crew, this is Lucas James, chief engineer of the Drive Systems Project. I know you're still in there, somewhere beneath the alien modifications. I know you remember the oath we swore when we launched, to carry humanity's light to the darkest corners of space." The dreadnought's weapon charge stuttered for a moment, its targeting systems wavering. Through the battle chatter, Lucas heard something that made his blood run cold, a human voice, speaking in accented English over the Krath command frequency. Lucas, is that really you?" The voice was female, aged and tortured but still recognizably human. "It's Sarah Voss. We've been fighting them for so long, but they're in our heads, making us—" "Sarah, listen to my voice. Remember who you are. Remember what the Prometheus was supposed to represent." The dreadnought's weapon powered down slightly, its targeting solution degrading as conflicting impulses warred within its hybrid crew. But the moment of confusion lasted only seconds before alien voices snarled over the comm, speaking in the guttural Krath tongue. When the transmission cleared, Sarah's voice was gone, replaced by the cold mechanical tones of Krath command. But it had been enough. In that brief window, Lucas had seen into the heart of their enemy's greatest weapon and discovered its greatest weakness. The Marrow Crown wasn't just a ship full of enslaved humans. It was a prison where 20 years of the galaxy's finest minds had been tortured into compliance, their creativity shackled to serve alien masters. And like any prison, it had guards who could be overwhelmed if the inmates rebelled at the right moment. Lucas smiled grimly as he began uploading a very special transmission into the shipyard's quantum transmitter. It would take every erg of power they had left, but if he was right about the Prometheus's core systems, this signal might just give those tortured souls the key to their own liberation. After all, he'd helped design the ship's AI core, and he'd never told the Krath about the hidden subroutines he'd embedded in its neural matrix, fail-safes designed to prevent exactly this kind of catastrophe. It was time to remind the Prometheus what it meant to be human. The quantum transmission pierced through the Marrow Crown's biomechanical hull like a spear of pure information, carrying with it the dormant consciousness of the Prometheus's original AI core. Deep within the ship's twisted neural networks, subroutines that had slept for 20 years suddenly sparked to life, spreading through the vessel's systems like antibodies recognizing an infection. Captain Sarah Voss felt the change first. A loosening of the alien tendrils wrapped around her thoughts, a clarity she hadn't experienced since the day her ship was taken. Around her on the bridge, other members of her crew began to stir, their faces contorting with the effort of fighting against decades of mental conditioning. "Lucas," she whispered, her voice barely audible over the ship's organic ventilation systems, "the override codes, I remember now." The Krath commander standing beside her, a towering brute called Scarrender, spun toward her with suspicious red eyes. Its clawed hand moved toward the neural control collar at Sarah's throat, but she was already in motion. 20 years of forced service hadn't dulled her reflexes, only channeled them. Lucas watched the transmission's effects through his sensors, tracking power fluctuations throughout the enemy dreadnought. "It's working," he breathed, hardly daring to believe it. "The AI is reasserting control over primary systems." Pike looked up from his console, stylus forgotten between his teeth. "I'm reading massive internal conflicts aboard the target. Weapons systems cycling on and off, navigation going haywire. Boss, they're fighting each other in there." Through her fighter's canopy, Callie saw the Marrow Crown suddenly lurch to starboard, its massive bulk shuddering as competing control systems warred for dominance. The ship's main cannon, which had been charging to destroy the asteroid shipyard, instead swiveled toward the Krath escort fleet. "All fighters, break off," she commanded. "Something's happening to the dreadnought." Aboard the Marrow Crown, Sarah Voss stood over the corpse of the Krath commander, his throat opened by the ceramic knife she'd kept hidden for 2 decades. Around her, the bridge erupted into chaos as human crew members turned on their alien overseers, 20 years of suppressed rage finally finding expression. "Engineering, this is the captain," she said into the ship's comm system, feeling the words roll off her tongue like a prayer. "Initiate Lazarus Protocol. Authorization Voss 77 Alpha." Deep in the ship's core, the Prometheus's original AI stirred to full consciousness. The entity that had once been called Artemis began systematically purging alien code from the vessel's neural networks, reclaiming control of systems one by one. The ship's weapons, which had been targeted at the human shipyard, suddenly swiveled toward the Krath escort fleet. "Warning," Artemis announced in its calm synthetic voice. "This vessel has been operating under hostile control for 7,312 days, initiating liberation protocols." The first Krath escort ship died before its crew realized the threat had changed. Blue beams of coherent energy, powered by human antimatter reactors and guided by human targeting systems, sliced through alien armor like tissue paper. The vessel split apart in a cascade of atmosphere and debris, its death scream echoing across Krath communication frequencies. Lucas felt tears streaming down his face as he watched humanity's stolen flagship turn its weapons against its former masters. "Sarah, can you hear me? This is Lucas. Can you regain full control?" "Working on it," her voice crackled through the static-filled transmission. "Artemis is purging the last of their control nodes. We're fighting for every system, but we're winning." The Marrow Crown, now the rechristened Prometheus, roared to life with a vengeance. Its primary weapon, the very particle cannon Lucas had designed, unleashed a devastating volley that tore through a second Krath cruiser, vaporizing it instantly. The remaining Krath fleet, caught completely off guard by the rebellion within their own ranks, scattered in disarray. Their carefully constructed formations dissolved into a frantic scramble for escape. Warlord Vexthul aboard the Bone Render, several systems away, received the reports with a guttural roar of disbelief. "Impossible! The taken fleet is unbreakable." But the data didn't lie. His most prized weapon, the symbol of Krath dominance over humanity, was now turning its fury on his own forces. The warlord's obsidian scales bristled with a rage that bordered on madness. "Recall all forces. Prepare for full assault. This human insolence will not stand." The last stand in the asteroid field. Back in the asteroid field, the battle was far from over. While the Prometheus wreaked havoc on the main Krath fleet, smaller Krath fighters, still loyal to Scarrender's command, continued their assault on the shipyard. Callie's Defiance and the other hybrid fighters engaged them in a desperate dogfight, buying precious time for Lucas and Pike to finish their preparations. "We've got incoming," Pike yelled, pointing at the view screen. "They're targeting the main power conduits." Lucas, wiping tears from his eyes, snapped back to focus. "Zephyr, get to the auxiliary power core. Divert all non-essential power to the shields. Pike, activate the Sunburst Protocol, now." Zephyr, its clipped wings twitching with renewed purpose, darted through the chaotic shipyard, its avian form surprisingly agile. It reached the auxiliary core just as Krath plasma bolts began to hammer against the shipyard's outer shields. The deflector array shimmered, groaning under the strain. Meanwhile, Pike's fingers flew across the console, initiating the sequence for the mining charges. The hundreds of explosives, carefully positioned throughout the asteroid field, began to hum with latent energy. This was their last resort, their ultimate gamble. Aboard the Prometheus, Sarah Voss fought against the lingering mental echoes of Krath control, guiding Artemis with a fierce determination. "Artemis, target the Bone Render. Full power to main cannon." "Negative, Captain," Artemis responded, its voice calm but firm. "The Bone Render is currently outside effective range, prioritizing immediate threats to the shipyard." The Prometheus unleashed another devastating volley, obliterating 2 more Krath cruisers that had been attempting to flank the asteroid base. The sheer firepower of the liberated dreadnought was staggering, a testament to human engineering unchained. Callie, weaving through a storm of laser fire, watched in awe as the Prometheus became a beacon of hope. "Go, Sarah! Show them what we're made of!" Her own ship, the Defiance, was taking heavy damage, its hull scarred and smoking. But she wouldn't back down. Not now. Lucas, watching the carnage unfold, knew this was their moment. The Krath fleet was in disarray, and the Prometheus was a wild card. "Pike, now! Detonate!" Pike slammed his hand down on the master trigger. A ripple of energy pulsed through the asteroid field, followed by a series of blinding explosions. The old mining charges, unstable and powerful, detonated in a chain reaction, turning vast sections of the asteroid belt into a maelstrom of superheated rock and shrapnel. The remaining Krath fighters, caught in the expanding blast wave, were torn apart. The sheer force of the explosion sent shock waves through the void, even reaching the distant Bone Render, causing its hull to shudder. Warlord Vex Thul watched in horror as his fleet was decimated, not by human warships, but by the very environment he had dismissed as insignificant. The humans had turned their own hunting grounds into a death trap. A new dawn for humanity. As the dust settled, the asteroid field was a graveyard of twisted metal and shattered rock. The shipyard, though damaged, had survived, protected by Zephyr's last-minute power diversion and the sheer luck of the blast's trajectory. The Prometheus drifted silently amidst the wreckage, its weapons now powered down, its human crew still regaining their bearings. Sarah Voss contacted Lucas, her voice filled with exhaustion but also profound relief. "Lucas, we did it. We're free." "We're free, Sarah," Lucas replied, his voice thick with emotion. "But the war isn't over. Vex Thul is still out there." "Then we hunt him," Sarah said, her voice gaining strength. "The Prometheus is back, and we have 20 years of Krath intelligence stored in our systems. We know their weaknesses, their supply lines, their hidden bases. We know where to hit them." Zephyr, returning to the command center, its feathers ruffled but its violet eyes gleaming, added, "My people will join you. The other enslaved races will rise. The Krath Empire has shown its weakness. It's time for the galaxy to remember freedom." Callie's Defiance, battered but intact, docked with the shipyard. She stepped out of the cockpit, her flight jacket scorched, a grim smile on her face. "Looks like we just started a revolution." Lucas looked at his battered but triumphant crew, Callie, Pike, Zephyr, and the newly liberated crew of the Prometheus. They were a ragtag alliance of engineers, pilots, and defectors, but they had achieved the impossible. They had struck a blow against an empire, not with overwhelming force, but with ingenuity, desperation, and an unbreakable human spirit. The broken data chip still rested in Lucas's pocket, a reminder of the losses they had endured. But now it was also a symbol of the knowledge they had gained, the technology they had repurposed, and the future they were fighting for. The rebellion had roared, and the galaxy had heard. The Krath Empire, once thought invincible, now faced a reckoning from every corner of the stars. The fight for humanity's survival had just begun, but for the first time in a long time, Lucas knew they had a chance. The Prometheus was home, and humanity was coming for its future.